Hey y'all, hey, it's your girl Morgan Renee, and we are back for another story time with Moramai. It's been a while, maybe a month or two, and I've been fiending to get to you guys. I've been fiending to read. I've been traveling, doing the most, and I haven't had any hard copies on me because I'm traveling light, trying to be more detached and downsize and minimize and all that jazz. But I was like, I gotta read to the people. So I found this book for 50 cents in the thrift store. It's called Tryin to Sleep in the Bed You Made by Virginia DeBerry and Donna. And I feel like I either had this book before or I had another book by the both of them. Either way, this goes against what I said I was going to be reading next. I said I was going to be reading more farm themed and herbs and pregnancy type books, but it is what it is. We'll do a mix, we'll do a balance. I'll probably be reading 2 books at a time. So I just want to get into this. Again, it's called Tryin to Sleep in the Bed You Made by Virginia DeBerry and Donna Grant, who are actually best friends. And it starts off with a prologue. And y'all know I like to read a prologue, intro, table of contents, all of that. This don't have a table of contents though. Just I don't read the acknowledgments. They be thanking everybody that helped put the book together. But here we go. Let's hop into it. Welcome back to Story Time with Moramai. So the prologue goes as follows. What happened to my life? 1989, Westchester, New York. This don't make no kind of sense. Gail plucked a wet towel from the bathroom doorknob and flung it toward the white terry cloth mound on the gold-veined marble floor. This heifer just checked in last night and already used every towel in the place. She wiped her hand roughly against her thigh to dry it, then shuddered, still feeling the unidentifiable orange-scented goo she palmed while changing the sheets in the room next door. From the moment Gail entered this room and eyed the expensive clothes tossed on the bed, spilling onto the floor, she knew this woman had money, or at least liked to look like she did. Some of those same pricey designer labels, neatly arranged by color and style, used to hang in her own walk-in closet. At least that made it easy to organize for the consignment shop. She stood to retrieve a soggy washcloth wadded up in the middle of the tub and felt so tired she could have curled up on the hard, cold enamel and been asleep before her eyes closed. Snap out of it. She straightened up and went to the sink. Mocha makeup streaks stained the hand towels balled up next to the basin. So it's a sister. Gail pitched the towels into the pile. It don't take long to become just like Miss Ann. I know her mama didn't raise her to be this nasty. It reminded Gail of how her husband used to fuss when she dusted and neatened up at home before the housekeeper came, but he didn't grow up listening to his mama go on about cleaning up behind filthy people. She had hated those stories and any other reminders her mother was a cleaner woman, but turning out to be... Hold on, let me go back. I feel like I'm reading that all off. Okay. So, hold on. It says, it reminded Gail of how her husband used to fuss when she dusted and neatened up at home before the housekeeper came. But he didn't grow up listening to her mama go on about cleaning up behind filthy people. She hated those stories and any other reminders her mother was a cleaning woman, but determined not to be the subject of similar tales. She always ignored his wisecracks and kept on dusting. When we stayed at hotels like this, I never left such a stop it, Gail, just stop it. That was another life, and every day she vowed to stop reliving him, at least in the daytime. The dreams were bad enough. I gotta let him go. Gail spritzed the expansive mirror and vigorously polished, erasing the hairspray cloud and toothpaste specks without once catching her own reflection. She didn't need a mirror to tell her she looked like somebody sent for her and couldn't come, as her daddy would have said. It was the one good thing about this job. As a part-time hotel maid, she didn't even have to pretend she cared how she looked. The shapeless gray and pink uniform hung like a potato sack, hiding her curves, but it was better this way. At least most of the men who stayed one drink too long in the hotel lounge had stopped calling her girly and asking what she charged for extra room service. If I'd stopped caring how everything looked a long time ago, I wouldn't be in this sorry mess now. She picked up a still slick bar of hotel soap with the abandoned shower cap and threw them in the trash. The long, wavy brown hair Gail had pampered and glorified in all her life was carelessly twisted into a frizzy knot at the nape of her neck. For the first time in her life, Gail avoided mirrors. The golden glow of her skin had sallowed, and sooty crescents had settled beneath the eyes he used to love to gaze into. I put the fire into your big brown eyes, he'd say, and I'll always keep it burning. Is this wind too much? Can y'all hear? Put up a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Let me know. The long way, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and I'll always keep it burning. But after he vanished, the flame dimmed and flickered, and now it was ash cold. Gail held her breath and fought the tears that threatened every time she poured the pungent disinfectant in the toilet. I need this job. Vanessa and Mama need me to have this job. She switched her rag around the seat, folded the toilet paper edge into a perfect triangle, then poked her head into the bedroom and checked the clock. Only 10:30. Gail sank to her knees and scrubbed the tub. Lord, what happened to my life? Before she finished, she was startled by palsied rattling of the door. Shit, I hate these damn cards. Money. He asked if I wanted money. The woman's muffled voice quaked with rage. What the hell is wrong with the key? The shaking intensified, punctuated by sharp kicks. What is wrong with this girl? Gail rose to open the door. What are you doing in here? I'm checking out. The woman snarled as she shot angrily through the doorway. Doesn't anybody in this damn hotel know what they're doing? Heat seared Gail's cheeks. To keep from saying what was on her mind, she looked down and felt in her apron pocket for the list of rooms to clean she was given when she started her shift. But when the woman flung her folio on the desk and sent a vase of roses crashing to the floor, Gail nearly jumped out of her skin. Would you leave? Now? Oh my God, it can't be. Gail was dumbstruck, riveted in place. But that voice, it was clipped and commanding now. All traces of the down-home drawl long gone, but she could almost hear that rich alto singing from the back of the choir loft. Gail stared as the woman yanked open her suitcase, snatched clothes from the bed, and stuffed them into the black leather bag. She noted the woman's hair, style in a sleek, sophisticated cap. No more nappy kitchen, much less those wiry pickaninny braids Mama used to frown at when we were kids. She's still on the round side, but a lot thinner than before. And that outfit would pay my rent for the next 2 months. It's been 10 years at least. Are you deaf or just plain stupid? I said get the hell out. The woman wheeled from the closet, clenching a red chiffon dress like she would rip it in two. Her eyes blazed right through Gail. It really is Patricia. Gail looked dead in Pat's face, opened her mouth to speak, but clamped it shut again, silenced by the scalding stare. I have to say something. She tried to find words, but this time choked on the memory of their last stormy meeting and how shamefully she had treated Pat, her best friend, the closest thing to a sister she ever had. Suddenly, Pat spun around and continued packing. Anger and embarrassment enveloped Gail in a hot, musty, airless haze. She backed slowly from the room, daring Pat to see her. A film of sweat coated her body, and anger seeped through her uniform. Miss High and Mighty thinks she's too good to know me. She lived in my house when her own mother wouldn't own her. Gail pulled the door to, then sagged against the wall and shivered with a fevered chill, her head in a daze, her heart in an uproar. Damn you, I hate you, Pat's anguished wail pierced the quiet. Gail was drawn toward the cry, reached for the knob, but she knew there was much more than the door still between them. Then a torrent of sobs from Pat's room flooded the impenetrable, carpeted silence of the hall. All the years we were together, everything that happened, I never heard Pat cry, not even that day. And then that's the end of the intro. Let me see how long part 1 is, chapter 1 is. I don't see no thumbs up or thumbs down. Can y'all hear? Is the wind too much? Okay, chapter 1 got a little length to it. It's fine. All right. Should I go on? I feel like I should. All right, we're going on. Oh, Jesus. Thank you. All right, Shawnee girl. Is it Shawnee or Shawnee? All right. Chapter 1, An Invisible Crack in the World. So that was 1989 when the prologue started in Westchester, New York. Now this is 1969, 20 years before, in Queens, New York. All right. I gotta pee. Bad, Gail whispered to Pat. Fat snowflakes had settled on Gail's rabbit fur hat and on her bangs, framing her small almond face like a halo. You went before we left school. Pat knew Gail was stalling to keep from facing her parents with dismal grades. Pat pulled at her green knit cap, trying to keep her hair dry. Her straight-A report card was tucked inside the folded newspaper cover of her math book, but she'd have hell to pay if Aunt Verna had to get out the passing cone before Saturday. First thrown together in kindergarten by the random selection of alphabetical order, Patricia Reed and Gail Saunders were as different and as inseparable as day and night. Pat had been raised by Ma Ray, a cake-baking, opinionated woman with immense bosoms and fat, hugging arms, in Swan City, a hiccup near Raleigh Bay on the North Carolina coast. Lil Daddy had passed soon after Pat's hello holler to the world, but Ma Ray's here. Wait a minute. Lil Daddy had passed soon after Pat's hello holler to the world, but Ma Ray's here for you, sugar. Then, when Pat was 6, Ma Ray passed too. Pat went north to live with her Aunt Verna, a hard knot of a woman with no space in her heart of her life for a little girl. Her first week in the small, dark, second-floor flat, Pat learned not to mention Ma Ray and to be very quiet, especially after her aunt's late nights on her job at the Easy Street Bar and Grill. So let me go back, make sure I like to pay attention when I'm reading. So she was living in North Carolina, and then when she died, she went to go live with her Aunt Vernon. But then when Pat was 6, Ma Ray passed too. Okay, went north. All right, and say specifically where. Okay, but this do say it's in Queens, so she learned she learned to be very quiet, especially after her aunt's late nights on her job at the Easy Street Bar and Grill. Luckily, fall soon came. Since Pat was from the South, which to teachers up north meant she was at least borderline backwards, she was put back a grade. But starting school meant that for at least half a day, she didn't have to be quiet, and she wasn't alone. Pat was chubby and chocolate brown with a wise, wide-eyed face she would grow into and hair that resisted the taming of heat and grease. Her classmates called her Aunt Jemima on the pancake box and made fun of her accent, which was thick and as slow as molasses Ma Ray had laced in her infant bottles. The madder they made her, the more determined she became not to show it. Gifted with keen intelligence, nurtured by the strong mother wit of Ma Ray, Pat quickly proved she was smarter than she looked. In class, she always had the answer, which impressed the teacher, but not the students, except for Gail. She said it's about to storm. Yeah, not in the area I'm in, though. It's kind of, it looks like it's alright. But I'm nearby where I need to be, so I go in if I need to. And I got my rain suit and my poncho, girl. Jacksonville got me prepared for these streets, child. So Pat was So dainty and honey-colored with long, wavy, good hair, Gail was the answered prayer of Joseph and Loretta Saunders. They married late, past the point when anyone at the venerable Mount Moriah Baptist Church thought they'd bother. To make up for lost time, they worked hard, saved money for a house, and soon moved to Harlem, to St. Albans, Queens, the home of Count Basie, James Brown, and other important people Loretta was happy to tell you. It was a 2-bedroom frame house with a brick front, pale green siding, a bay window, and, best of all, it was detached, a fine thing to all their apartment living friends. The lot was even big enough for a carport and a brick barbecue pit in the backyard. Joseph and Loretta were all set for a family, yet after 12 years and 3 cruel miscarriages, folks said they were too old and out of stock. Goodness, most of their friends' children were nearly grown. But ever since she was little, Loretta, the ninth of 10 in a family where nothing seemed new or enough, had dreamed of being grown and having a daughter. Only one, so she could dress her in pretty clothes bought just for her. She'd have a pink room with dainty white furniture, a room like Shirley Temple must have had, a room of her own. Just when Loretta and Joseph were beginning to think their friends were right, praise the Lord, their prayers were answered, and Gail Denise Saunders arrived, crying and hollering and demanding to be noticed. Although Loretta was thrilled, she worried that Joseph might be disappointed since she knew Ben wanted sons, but Gail landed like an arrow, smacking the bull's eye of her daddy's heart. He worked for 2 days with no sleep, laying carpet, hanging Peter Rabbit wallpaper in the nursery, and putting the finishing touches on the new dresser and canopy cradle. Gail was their pretty, pampered size, loved and spoiled by her parents every day, so kindergarten was a rude awakening. She was unhappy to find herself surrounded by dozens of children clamoring for the teacher's attention. Gail's long hair, worn loose, not braided, her clothes Sunday best for other children, and her standoffishness marked her as someone who thought she was too cute, and she was isolated accordingly. Gail was so miserable that her good Baptist parents considered enrolling her in Catholic school, but on the day the class had to choose partners for an outing to the park, Gail decided not to be left alone again. She chose Patty, the other girl nobody ever picked, and a friendship began. To Gail, Pat seemed like she knew things, and she never seemed lonely or worried, even when she was by herself. and Gail let Pat into her fantasy world where anything was possible and it was okay to be a child. They shared finger paints and animal crackers and the hand clap slap of Miss Mary Mac, all dressed in black. They played dolls and blocks, but they always played together, and by first grade, each declared the other her best friend. Loretta, however, did not approve of Pat or her people, meaning she didn't like Verna Reed's job as a barmaid. She kept trying to convince Gail she could find a nicer girl to be her best friend. Gail didn't care what Loretta thought on the subject and persisted in inviting Pat over. Lips pursed and nose out of joint, Loretta would complain to Joseph that Verna and her ilk were exactly what they left Harlem to avoid. Patty's only child, Etta, Patty's only a child, Etta, Joseph had said over the sports page. Smart one at that. Gail can learn a thing or two from her. Loretta was so put out with Joseph, she put him out of her bed for a week. Dang. Verna thought Gail's family was uppity for no good reason. Her daddy's a damn janitor and her mama does day work. Pat sat in silence, playing with a bowl of tricks and pretending to watch Soul Train while Verna ran it. They treated that silly-ass girl like she's something special, always tossing her hair like she white. Verna couldn't figure out why the hell Pat, with her flat face and eyes like a wild-eyed pike, wanted to be around somebody who made her look even more homely. But if Pat wanted to be a fool, that was on her. Now, in 5th grade, the unlikely twosome was inseparable. The very children who had disliked Gail because she was so pretty were eventually drawn to her for the same reason. Pat had all but lost her Carolina drawl, but brains didn't make you popular. She was quiet and a little too bookish, and she could be funny sometimes. She always had the right answers to math homework, and her inexplicable closeness to Gail sealed her acceptance. And the girls' walk home was ritual. By 3:40, they would reach Pat Street. She had orders from her aunt not to let any little bastards in my house. Verna called most days at 4 o'clock to make sure Pat was home alone, so rain or shine, the girls talked outside until 3:55. They discussed schoolwork, sang songs from the radio, and sometimes said things they didn't want anyone else to hear, like how Pat wanted to be a doctor or lawyer, somebody important so she didn't have to work at night like Aunt Verna, or wear those clothes that made men click their tongues and talk to her out the side of their mouths. Gail couldn't wait to be old enough to wear makeup, date, and get married, probably to a prince, because her daddy always had dirt under his nails, and her mama's hands were so rough they snagged her stockings. Besides, they worked all the time. It didn't seem like they had any fun. Pat inevitably asked the last time she saw a black prince. Pat inevitably asked the last time she saw a black prince. That doesn't mean there isn't one, and I plan to marry him. I'll find a prince for you, too, and we'll have a double wedding, Gail would announce, then stroll home daydreaming about gowns and weddings, which she would draw until her mother made her get to her homework. The snow was falling double time, and car tires whined, spinning for traction. Gail stomped the caked snow off her boots. Just went doesn't help when I gotta go now, Patty. To show the urgency of the situation, Gail passed up their daily stop at J&T Candy Store, where she would check for new hairstyle magazines and Archie comics because she loved that Veronica Lodge. Pat would buy a chocolate chip cookie the size of a 45 record to knock the edge off until she warmed the dinner plate Aunt Verna always left her. You are the what is this? Hold on, I never heard this word before. Peeiningest. You are the pianist girl. Oh, you are the pianist girl in the world. If there was a peeing contest, you win. Pat giggled, and Gail held her stomach and tried not to laugh, but she did anyway. Shh, Gail chided Pat as she glanced back and saw Marcus Carter climbing to the top of the icy gray mound, piled high by a snow plow. Going to the bathroom is girl stuff. Don't let him hear. Last year, Marcus had moved around the corner from Gail and appeared in their class and on their walk home. At first, they ignored him. He was, after all, a boy. But when Gail developed a crush on Marcus's 8th grade brother, Freddie, Marcus became the first male member of this very exclusive club. Marcus leapt off the bank with a whoop and grinned like a fool as he landed on his butt in the fresh snow. Everybody pees. He got up, galloped past them, and snatched Gail's hat. Trotting backwards, he added, I can pee and write my name in the snow at the same time. Freddie had just taught him this miraculous feat. That's nasty, and give me back my hat, Gail squealed and ran after him. They arrived in front of Pat's house, and hat in hand, Gail shifted her weight from foot to foot, looking pitiful. She knew Pat wasn't allowed company, but 3 C's, 2 D's, and an F for geography meant she'd have to listen to a lecture on how important education was so she could take care of herself and not have to scrub other people's floors and toilets. Come on, Patty. I can't hold it. I gotta go. Now. I can't walk another step. Gail crossed her heart and her legs. You mean if I tickle you, you'll pee all over yourself? Marcus said, his fingers wiggling in anticipation. Marcus Garvey Carter, I'll scream if you touch me, Gail threatened. Pat hemmed and hawed, yanking at a drooping knee sock. A resounding whop interrupted her debate as the frozen sparks of a well-aimed snowball exploded off Marcus's head. His books fell and skidded across the snow as he spun to face his attacker. Straight! Right in your bean head, shouted Freddie, bounding up to the trio. At 13, Freddie, a cocoa brown length of a budding muscle and energy, viewed tormenting Marcus as his brotherly right, secure that he was big enough to call the shots. Freddie Fastball Carter wins the World Series. Roberto Clemente, eat that. Tell me I ain't bad. Baseball is lame, Marcus yelled, then barreled into Freddie, knocking him to the powdery pavement. Ignoring the melee, Pat continued, You only live 4 more blocks, Gail. You can make it if you stop talking and start walking. Please, it's too cold and I can't wait. Gail looked near tears. All right, but you gotta hurry up. Pat swung open the chain-link gate and felt under her scarf for her keys, which dangled from the braided orange lanyard Gail had made for her last summer in Vacation Bible School. Gail followed, but a howl stopped them before Pat unlocked the door. Oh, Freddie, man, you busted my lip. Look, I'm bleeding. Marcus triumphantly pulled his lower lip down to display the blood collecting around his teeth. Wait till I show Daddy. He gonna whip your butt. He told you to quit messing with me. Ew, Gail groaned as Marcus spit out a mouthful of blood that dotted the snow like red hots. Don't be no sissy, man. You ain't even hurt. Freddie lifted his drawstring gym bag and gingerly dusted off the snow. Besides, I got something in here I want to show you, but I ain't showing no sissy, Freddie said, baiting his hook. You ain't got nothing in that stupid bag but some more than stupid motorcycle magazines, Marcus said, trying to resist the enticing lure. That's what you say, not what I know. Freddie dangled the bait in front of Marcus. What's he got in there? Gail whispered to Pat. Marcus, unable to ignore temptation, bit. Okay, I won't tell. He prepared to spit again. Don't you spit no more blood out in front of my house, Pat yelled, knowing that somehow she'd be blamed for it. What am I supposed to do? Marcus tried not to swallow. You could come up to wash your mouth out, and Freddie could come too, so you act right, Gail offered. Gail? Pat shot her friend a scalding glance, which was answered by Gail's, oh, come on, just this once, smile. Pat sighed and reluctantly opened the door. But y'all have to be out of here by 4, no kidding. Everybody could do their business by then. They rumbled up the steps and into the apartment. Pat hurried Gail to the bathroom and tried to find the others to the narrow hall, except that meant they were right outside the bedroom and Gail wouldn't pee until they moved. The boys were remanded to the living room. Dag, you sleep on the couch? Marcus poked a pile of clumsily folded sheets and blankets. None of your business, and keep your old nasty hands off of my stuff. Pat emerged from the kitchen and handed Marcus a napkin for his mouth. She missed her bed in Swan City. It was near a window, and she would lie at night counting the stars beyond a clutch of scruffy pine trees, except when there was thunder and lightning. Then she would take her covers and hide with Ma Ray in the pantry where there was no windows and nothing electric. Ma would tell stories about when she was little while they waited out the storm. The sofa was comfortable, though she could watch TV in her pajamas with all the lights out when she was by herself at night. What you gonna show me? Marcus zeroed in on Freddie, forgetting his injured mouth. Freddie knelt on the parquet linoleum and carefully loosened the drawstring of his bag. The hood of his jacket fell forward, obscuring most of his face. You gotta swear not to tell. You hear me? Never. Nobody. Freddie hunched over like a wizard, fiercely protecting the secret magic hidden in his pouch. Pat's curiosity drew her closer. You too, you have to swear. Caution, fear, and excitement tinged his solemn voice. Good sense told Pat that Freddie should take his bag, its contents, and his brother and get out because Aunt Verna was going to call any minute. But her 11-year-old need to know made her slowly nod yes as she crossed her heart and swore not to tell. Freddie milked the anticipation. I shouldn't be showing you this. Y'all just kids, but he reached inside and slowly, reverently withdrew his secret by its black plastic handle. Patricia's mouth dropped open as she backed away. You gotta get out of here now. You gotta leave. Marcus swelled with an excited intake of air. Where'd you get it? That's a toy, man. That ain't no real gun. Marcus looked skeptically at the Saturday night special. This ain't no toy, chump. I found it on the way to school next to a garbage can in Baisley Park. You lie. Let me hold it. Marcus sprang toward Freddie. Time oozed in thick, oily seconds. Pat wanted to be outside again, waving goodbye to Gail, but she couldn't alter the past or grab hold of the present enough to change it. Nah, man, it's dangerous. Freddie moved to tuck the gun away. Dense and slippery, the time slick spread. I bet you never saw these lips. Gail sashayed from the bathroom, her mouth painted with Verna's lipstick and a plum so deep it looked crude. She stopped cold when she saw the melee. Come on, let me hold it. Marcus reached around Freddie, grabbing at the pistol. Stop, Marcus! But he couldn't, and the boys locked, struggling over the weapon. Marcus, cut it! A cackle, a crackle, no louder than a finger snap, stopped them all. Pat saw Freddie fall through Marcus's arm and land on the floor in slow motion. Then the shrill ring of the phone cut the thick silence. Pat knew it was her aunt, and she couldn't answer. Get up, Marcus commanded, standing over his brother. Quit playing. He took hold of Freddie's shoulder and turned him face up. Gail screeched. Freddie's mouth opened and closed, but no words escaped. Marcus pleaded, come on, get up. But then the scarlet trickled from the corner of Freddie's lips, and Pat knelt and unzipped his parka, relieving the small hole and the big wet spot on the front of his striped velour shirt. Stumbling clear of hearing and the sick, greasy knot in her throat, Pat found the phone and called for help. Time blurred and focused. In the lucid moments, Pat said, just tell the truth. You didn't do it on purpose. But Gail ranted they would all rot in jail if they told that Marcus and Freddie had fought over the gun. Freddie tripped over his books. It was an accident, she insisted. Marcus paced, not uttering a sound, like something wild that was cornered. Sirens blared. Paramedics worked feverishly on Freddie as a cop ushered the children outside past the crowd that gathered and bundled them into a patrol car. A quiet... Hold on, y'all. 1 second, my phone ain't charging like I thought it was. It's getting good. Oh, is it dead? Portable charger dead? It is. Okay. Well, read as much as I can. About how Freddie stumbled over. Okay. So, a quiet man in a brown tweed coat squatted next to the open door and asked what happened. Without hesitation, Marcus told about coming upstairs to wash his bloody mouth, what Freddie said about finding the gun, and heaping the lie on the pile of truth about how Freddie stumbled over his books and fell on the gun and it went off. Pat and Gail nodded their agreement. After a few more questions, Tweed Coat left them alone. They knew it wasn't snowing anymore. They knew there were no handles on the inside of the police car doors. They knew they were scared, and they knew they would keep Marcus a secret. But what happens when Freddie wakes up? He'll tell the truth, Pat asked. Gail and Marcus looked startled by this thought, but before they could answer, a cop got in the car and started the engine. Freddie's okay, right? Gail asked. The cop sighed, tossed his cap on top of a clipboard in the front seat, and ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, kids. And then they knew that Freddie was dead. Gail wailed like a banshee. Pat tried to comfort her. Marcus clutched his arms around himself like a straitjacket and stared out the window, clenching and releasing his jaw, the salty taste of blood still in his mouth. Gail's parents arrived at the precinct house first, and as soon as Gail saw them, she dissolved in tears. Loretta gathered her daughter in her lap. She wiped Gail's eyes, cleaned the lipstick smeared around her mouth, and rocked her. Joseph watched, looking pained and sucking so deeply on the cigarette he barely exhaled any smoke. Eventually, Gail calmed down enough to answer questions for the detective. When she explained what she was doing at Pat's, Joseph said, "But you know to come straight home after school." "Hush, Joseph. The child's been punished enough," Loretta said. When Tweed Coat finished with Gail, Joseph and Loretta tried to take her home, but she got hysterical, refusing to abandon Pat and Marcus, so they stayed. Booker Carter appeared, still wearing his blue-gray postal uniform and thick-soled black shoes. Ethel, his wife, was too upset to come, so he had a neighbor stay with her. Booker's shoulders always lifted to the left to mark the place where his mailbag hung, but now they both slumped, the weight of his sons a heavier burden than he could bear. Marcus sat, head bowed, silent, wedged in the corner of a wooden bench. He saw the black shoes, polished to shine like patent despite the snow, and raised his eyes to meet his father's, but the pain he saw in a split second was blinding, and he lowered them again. Booker T. Washington They got some names on them. George Marcus Garvey Carter. Booker T. Washington Carter Jr. had a government job. That meant he had done better in life than his father, but he felt that the prophecy of his great name had not been fulfilled. When his sons were born, he decided to give them each their own great name legacy, and with it their own chance at something more. But now that hope, that wish for better lives for his sons, leaked like tears from the corners of his heart. Tweed Coat escorted Booker to an office and spoke to him in sympathetic official tones. It was terrible about his son. The police had reason to believe the gun was ditched after liquor store robbery. And by the way, where was Freddie last night? My son ain't robbed no liquor store, Booker said with finality. After more questions and paperwork, Tweed Coat told Booker he'd have to go to the morgue and identify the body. Then he brought Marcus in. The boy told his story, showing his bloody lip and telling the tale of Freddie's fall. When they were done, father took son lightly by the arm. Booker walked like his legs wouldn't carry him much farther, and when they got to the door, he gave way, slumped against the frame, and sobbed open and unashamed. His shoulders heaved, his face glistened with tears. "Oh, Lord, why did you take my boy?" The hustle-bustle of the room quieted to an embarrassed, nervous murmur, and Marcus, who had never seen his father cry, wished with all his heart he was dead, too. In a minute, Booker collected himself, mopped his face with his handkerchief, and took Marcus home to his mother. Verna came in the door, black leather coat flapping, cussing, the sour malt smell of Johnny Walker Red punctuating every word. "Where the shit is she?" A Salem dangled from her lips and wagged as she spoke. Pat, who sat staring at her fat knees, still shiny from this morning's greasing, flinched when she heard the gritty voice. She steeled for the harangue. I don't know this word. Harangue. She steeled for the harangue. I'm gonna have to look that up. Goddamn police dragging me down here because this little bitch decides she's gonna have a party while I'm out working my ass off. Knew from the get-go you wasn't never gonna be nothing but trouble. Gail turned up to cry again. Pat tried to explain, but went silent when Verna raised the back of her hand. The blow landed with a resounding whack on Pat's cheek. Joseph rose from his seat, but Tweed Coat intervened and led Pat and Verna, still fussing, to his office. Pat answered questions the best she could with Verna's commentary in the background. Tweed Coat seemed nice, and Pat wanted to tell him she was a good girl and show him her report card as proof, but she just told him what he needed to know, and so did the way they all promised they would. When he was done with her, he asked her to wait outside on the bench. He wanted to talk to Verna alone. Verna's outburst periodically interrupted the hum of the station house. "None of your damn business what time I get home," or "Ain't nobody give me nothing except her, and I didn't want that." With each outburst, Gail and Pat huddled closer. Loretta cringed and gave Joseph her "I told you about that woman" look. Pat stiffened when she heard the furious tap-tapping of Verna's high-heeled boots against the green and gray tile floor. Hand jammed into waist and disappearing into a roll of flesh, Verna posed in front of her niece. Pat stood automatically. "Don't be too hard on the girl," Joseph said, gathering his family to leave. Verna cut her eyes. "Maybe you ought to stop minding my business and ask your child what she and them boys was doing in my house." She pinched the shoulder of Pat's coat, snapped, "Come on," and propelled her into the night. The day of the funeral, Pat and Gail clutched hands in the pew of the storefront Temple of the Lord, trying to be brave. Loretta and Joseph sat beside them, looking weary. Pat listened to Just As I Am, played low on the organ, and tried to ignore her stringing legs, a reminder of the extension cord whipping she got of her stinging legs, a reminder of the extension cord whipping she got the night of the shooting. In Swan City, church was part of every week, but Verna didn't hold much with religion, so Pat hadn't been to church since Mare's funeral. Now, Pat heard Ma's alto singing, without one plea, "But thy blood was shed for me." That's when she saw Freddie in his blood-soaked shirt and closed her eyes to stay the tears. Frightened but unable to look away, Gail stared at the array of flowers guarding the white casket. She thought the roughly lining looked like Reddy Whip. Then she saw the arm of Freddie's white suit, and a vision of Marcus and Freddie caked in snow flashed in her mind. She shuddered and faced Pat, whose lids fluttered open. Silently, Gail asked, "This all happened, didn't it? Freddie's really dead?" Pat's eyes answered back, "Yes." Just then, the Carter family entered the church. Booker supported Ethel, who moaned helplessly. My baby. Oh, my baby. Marcus followed solemnly, wearing a baggy blue suit. He looked vacant, holding back tears, hung at the corners of Pat's eyes when she saw him. As he passed their pew, Gail began to sob, and Marcus paused long enough to give her his handkerchief. Gail peered at it, then timidly looked at him. He doesn't hate me. She clutched the starched square, and he continued up the aisle. The preacher worked the congregation until he dripped sweat, and their misery flowed in anger. Let's see what we can do. Freddie's baseball coach spoke movingly of the wasted potential and promise, and as the soloist sang his eyes on the sparrow. Ushers signaled each pew to file by the casket and say goodbye to Freddie. By the time their roll was called, Gail was crying so hard that Joseph stayed behind and cradled her. She clutched the now sodden handkerchief. Pat followed Loretta to the front of the church. On either side of Freddie's head were white satin pillows lettered in gold. One son, one brother. His skin looked chalky to Pat, just like Ma Ray did. When she stood opposite Marcus, she just didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. She reached out and took his hand in a dry, cold grip, and she leaned in and kissed him on the cheek, then moved on. When it was time for the family's farewells, Ethel Carter tried to climb into the coffin. Leave him be. He's just resting, she wailed, and had to be restrained until Marcus spoke. It's okay, Mom. It'll be okay, she said. But in her mind, it was Freddie talking, and she calmed down, saying, see, I told you he was just asleep. Gail's folks decided not to go to the cemetery, afraid the scene would be too hard on the girls. After a lunch, they all picked over. They left Pat at her door, as Verna had instructed, looking small and frightened despite her valiant front. Pat dragged upstairs, wishing she could have gone home with Gail, but grateful her aunt was already gone. She just wanted to lie down and wait for the pounding in her head to stop. Her breath rose in puffy clouds, which meant the landlord had let the oil tank run dry again, so she tried to light the oven. Holding the match over the hole and turning the knob at the same time proved a greater challenge than Pat was up to, and each time she bent over, her head throbbed harder, so she gave up. Still wearing her coat and hat, she lay on the sofa, swaddled in her blanket, and wished for Ma Ray. Then she bolted up and rummaged through the plaid fabric suitcase that still held everything she had brought with her from Swan City until she found it. After Ma Ray was buried in the old cemetery behind the church, everybody had come back to the house. They ate and drank, and people started taking things, knickknacks or the silver cream pitcher, something to remember her by. Pat wanted something too, so she sneaked into Ma Ray's bedroom while the others were busy reminiscing. It was strange being in the dark, crowded room. It still smelled like her, like lavender soap and sassafras tea. Pat reached way in the back corner of the mahogany chiffon behind the shoes, avoiding the mousetrap, and found the bergamot tin where Ma Ray kept her good jewelry, the jet cluster earrings, the Sunday strand of just like real pearls she bought at the belts in Raleigh, a cufflink with fancy letters Pat liked to trace with her finger, and the one lacy gold hoop earring. Ma had laughed till she cried when Pat asked if her daddy was a pirate. Holding the tin made it seem that Ma was with her, and Pat settled back into the blanket and closed her eyes. Clutching the box in her hand, she shoved in her pocket. That siren sounds like it's right outside, Pat thought only minutes had passed. That the clanking she heard was still her headache, but at least it's a little warmer. Good, I won't have to hear Aunt Verna cuss the landlord when she gets home. A few more blocks. Not gonna make it. Who's talking? But the voices were jumbled and unfamiliar. I must have left the TV on. Pat tried to open her eyes, but her lids felt leaden. Ma, I dreamed about her. Back in Swan City, I was following her down the dirt road, and she turned around. Go on back, child. You can't come with me. Not now. Hey, I think she's coming round. Pat felt like she was hurtling through space, but when she tried to move, she was stunned to find herself firmly strapped in place. Forcing her eyes to open a sliver, she saw a plastic bag of clear liquid suspended in the air and swinging like a manic pendulum. Fear gripped her, but she tried to speak and found her mouth was covered. That's right, just keep breathing, Pat. That's your name, right? We're pulling in right now. You're going to be okie dokie, Patty. The rest was a banging of doors, a blur of doctors, nurses, needles, questions. What? How? When? Who? And answers, I don't know. Yes, no, I don't know. What did I do wrong? Voices hovered nearby. Gas on. So thick your eyes watered. Could be a suicide, but she's so young. Thank God for the neighbors. Where are her parents? Pat heard her name. Slowly, the fog lifted. Pat still didn't understand what had happened, but she knew it was bad. Then a woman, who smelled vaguely of mothballs, started asking questions again. Before Pat could answer, she heard it. Tap, click, tap, click, tap, click. What the fuck she do now? Verna never did get those raggedy boots fixed. The steel shank had worn through the rubber lip, and sidewalk shredded leather curl around the heel. First she let some boy get off to my house. The rings holding the pale yellow curtain around Pat's cubicle trembled noisily against the rod as the drape flew open. The ambush Verna had generously dabbed behind her ears and poured down her cleavage mixed with Johnny Red cigarettes and her own musk created a heady, unique perfume. Mrs. Reed, the woman who'd been questioning Pat, stepped forward into the scented smoky air that surrounded Verna. Verna stepped back. The only Mrs. Reed, my mama, and she's dead. Her head and shoulders rocked and rolled in indignant choreography for each word. Pat watched helplessly from her bed. Who the hell are you? You a cop like him? She nodded toward the policeman who stood by the doorway. Being stupid ain't no crime last time I checked. Chuckling at her own humor, she looked at Pat, then momentarily distracted, dug feverishly in her purse. Pat wished she could melt right into the covers. She didn't know how any of this happened, but Aunt Verna, who finally found her pack of Salems, was definitely drunk. I'm not a policewoman. I'm with the Department of Social Services. That's the welfare. I ain't on no welfare. Verna huffed drunkenly and put a cigarette to her lips. It's better if you don't smoke in here, the officer said. Better for who? Verna retorted and struck a match. Fuck you. No, come to think of it, it's a cop. It's a cop's loud. It's a cop. Oh, God. Let me get this out. Fuck you. No, come to think of it, a cop's a lousy leg. The only thing they shoot off is their mouth and their gun. Pat closed her eyes and silently inched down until the sheet covered her mouth. Please put that out. There's oxygen in you. He indicated the sign. Verna touched the match to the end of her cigarette. It's a free country. She took a drag. They can take that sign and shove it up there. The policeman snatched Verna by the sleeve. The rip under the arm of her black leather coat sputtered farther along the seam as Verna drew back her arm and landed a punch on the cop's nose. Pat wanted to explain that her aunt didn't mean it. She just got mad sometimes, but a swarm of guards pulled Verna away in a cloud of cussing. The next day, Pat was surprised when the social worker arrived and helped her dress. Undershirt and socks accompanied questions about Pat's home life, which she answered as best she could. Yes, she was alone sometimes, but she didn't mind. Aunt Verna was nice enough to take her in, and she promised not to be any more trouble. Why do you call your mother Aunt Verna? Pat looked puzzled. My mama's dead. She wasn't sure of much right now, but she was sure of that. She reached for her coat, pulled Ma Ray's bergamot tin from her pocket, and pried open the lid. See, this stuff was hers. If Ma Ray was here now, she'd fix everything. Then the woman sat on the bed and slowly, like she was talking to a 3-year-old, proceeded to rewrite the story of Pat's life. Verna went from the aunt who rescued her to the mother who threw her away. Ma Ray was my grandmother? What? Then the woman sat on her bed and slowly, like she was talking to a 3-year-old, proceeded to rewrite the story of Pat's life. Verna went from the aunt who rescued her to the mother who threw her away. Ma Ray was my grandmother? Pat lost her grip on the bergamot tin and it clattered to the floor. She couldn't make her arms move to get it. Putting those things back in the box wasn't going to help. She wanted to stomp the beads and earrings into dust, but the woman got down on all fours and continued talking while she picked them up. Only assault, but the cocaine possession, jail, custody, hearing, group home, foster parents, court order. Finally, the social worker placed a small metal box in Pat's palm, folded her fingers around it, and asked if she understood everything. Pat nodded yes, mechanically, but she hadn't heard much above the roar of her own thoughts. They wouldn't all lie to me. She must be wrong. Aunt Verna can't be my mother. Pat put on her coat and sat in the wheelchair. And where am I going now? She felt her throat constrict against a bitter taste biting at the back of her tongue. I won't throw up. Outside, an icy gust whipped candy wrappers and newspaper scraps into a motley whirlwind on the snow-clogged street. But Pat didn't feel the cold. She climbed into the battered green Dodge and rested her head against the frosted car window. The last thing that made sense was waving goodbye to Gail as the Saunderses drove off. I won't cry. I won't. Pat felt like she entered the twilight zone. From the moment she crossed her heart and promised Freddie she wouldn't tell, she slipped through an invisible crack in the world and landed in another dimension. All right. Well, that's the end of chapter 1 from Trying to Sleep in the Bed You Made. I'll pick up with it again soon. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Peace.